Hi guys, how are you doing? Once again, I am Constance and we are going to be talking about episode 11 of the George and Venus story. So let's get started. Frightened and shocked to a point of wetting his pants Saturday evening, George Greenback remained unremovable for a while until Richard Thomas shouted his name. "I'm coming, sir," George responded nervously as he scrutinized the urine soaking through his tan-colored pants. Completely embarrassed, George slowly made his way towards the waiting truck, where George's new employer arrogantly said, laughing, "Don't tell me at your age you're still pissing yourself." Face covered with shame, the potential business partner shyly replied, "I don't think I can bother with taking on this position again, sir." "Don't tell me this bullshit," Mr. Thomas said with a raised voice. Suddenly, the businessman remained quiet, somehow reflecting on the possible scenarios that could have happened to George to be changing his mind about a fantastic opportunity like this. "Wait a minute," exclaimed Thomas. "Did one of these idiots say something to you for you to be changing your mind?" continued the oil trader asking. For a while, George stood still, gazing into Mr. Thomas's eyes, and uttered not a word. But the businessman could read through the lines that something was happening or that something was very wrong. And immediately he ordered George to go in the back of his truck because he didn't want the stench of his urine taking over the front seat of his vehicle. Face still filled with embarrassment, George slowly walked to the back of the truck, opened the truck, and took his position there. Meanwhile, Richard Thomas stood leaning on the front of the truck with hands and feet folded across each other and began reflecting on reasons to give for sacking his current security men and employing new ones. But he needed for George to open his mouth and confess to him what these men had said to him that was so frightening and causing him to piss all over himself. For a good 15 minutes, Mr. Thomas just stood there alone with his thoughts. But when such a time was up, George would get the full blunt of his voice. "Listen to me, you village idiot," he said. "If any of these swindlers inside that building threatened you in any way, I need to know now." The young mechanic had had his chin to his knees while his eyes stared down at his shoes and on his feet as though they were transparent, as his lips remained tightly sealed. But little did George knew that if he was going to keep his tongue sealed, Richard Thomas would create a scenario that would place him into deeper trouble with his security men and have him talking. "I'm giving you one more chance to spill the beans, George, and then you're on your own," exclaimed the businessman, with eyes vexingly gazing down on George. Mr. Thomas didn't really want to cause any trouble for the young man his daughter was smitten by. He would have preferred for him to be one of his confidants, but with George acting like a female in distress, he wasn't quite sure if he could hold George in such high standard. My right-hand man? No way. The first sight of danger, he would start reeling off my secrets to the damn enemies, Richard Thomas thought to himself. Mr. Thomas was just about to pull George from his vehicle and leave him on the wayside when George's phone began ringing. It was Venus on the other end of the line, and soon as George realized that it was his girlfriend calling, he began screaming out her name as though he had news that someone in the family had died. Calm down, George, she commanded, hearing the ruffling sounds and snorting noise coming from his nostrils. But before George could get himself calm and indulge her with the happenings around him, Richard Thomas grabbed the phone from George's hands and began shouting into his daughter's ear. It seems as though some of my men has threatened your boyfriend, but he won't open his mouth and say anything to me about it, Venus' father informed her. But Venus didn't care to hear what her father needed to say to her presently. Give back the damn phone to George, Venus shouted at her father. My darling George, I'm so sorry for staying away from you so long, Venus uttered softly. I miss you, my darling, George mumbled between tears. What did my fathermen say to you? Venus went on to ask. They want money, Venus. They want me to include them in the payroll, George responded sadly. Give the phone back to Dad, Venus shouted at George, and so he complied. Did you hear that, Dad? They want to use him to increase their salary, Venus conveyed to her father. Richard soon began groaning and pacing around his vehicle repeatedly. Soon he returned the phone to his ears and shouted, Contact Blue Hawk for me right now and tell them to send me 6 men at once. Don't you have a damn secretary for that? Venus shouted back at her father. This is the end of episode 11. Guys, I hope you have loved this episode. Thank you for watching. Thank you for sharing. Please leave a comment about the story. How do you think the story is going so far? Hit the notification bell so whenever I post a video, you will be the first to have it. All right? Check the description box for comments about my merch, right? Leave your comments there, and I'm looking forward for you to joining me in my next class. Until then, bye-bye.